Good morning, and thanks for the introduction. As Laura said, this is a study I carried out with my colleague David, and it's about a quality comparison of the tear film between presbyopes and non-presbyopes. As you know, the tear film is a highly specialized structure that covers the limbal, the palpebral conjunctiva and the cornea. It's a three-lamina structure with a lipid layer, an aqueous layer, and a mucous layer. We will be particularly interested in the lipid layer, a thin layer, an oily layer with average thickness of 42 nanometers coming from the tarsal glands known as meibomian glands. The lipid layer can be found in different forms, either as a single layer or formed by several layers with the typical composition or structure, which is called duplex. Externally, there are cholesterol extracts, and on the other side, phospholipids, fatty acids that are in contact with the water. Part of the radius is reflected, so we have radius 1. Part of it is refracted. It goes through the lipid layer throughout its thickness, and at the level of the second surface, part of the radius will be reflected, and we will have a radius 2. Radius 1 and 2 will interfere with each other, and this interference will allow for the formation of colored fringes. Their color will depend on the thickness of the layer. So the mirror-like reflection in the lipid, in the tear film, will make it possible to assess the lipid film. We need the lipidoscope for this. It's a tool which allows us to assess not just the quality of the tear film, but also its structure and stability. There are also accessory grids which somehow make it easy to observe the BUT and the NIBUT. As for the classification of the lipid layer, Guyon identified 6 possible patterns where the lipid layer can fit. Let's look at them. First of all, you have the wide link marble-like pattern with mild lipid coverage. In the case of abnormal external agents, the stability of the tear film is considerably reduced in these subjects. Therefore, you may have the development of dry eye. Then you have a close link marble-like structure, which has a lot in common with the previous one. The thickness here may even be of 50 nanometers. It's slightly more stable than the previous condition. Then you have the wave pattern. It's a very common one with normal thickness between 50 and 70 nanometers. The structure is wavy, and it's due to the action that the lid performs on the ocular surface. The best pattern we may encounter is the amorphous one, where nothing special is observed. The surface is rather smooth and polished, and basically the lipid layer is very stable. The thickness is optimal. It ranges between 80 and 90 nanometers. Then you have the interference fringe pattern. It's very different from the others. The special thing about it is that the lipid layer shows different thicknesses in various sites. In some sites, the thickness is on average 80 nanometers. In other sites, it may even reach up to 180 nanometers, with major differences, therefore. And depending on these differences, we will have a fringe of different colors. This is an abnormal pattern. This pattern is described as a condition of lipid areas with normal areas. In some areas, you may find lipid bumps, for example, but in other sites, you have complete absence of the lipid layer, so the thickness cannot be quantified because there is irregularity. The goal of this study was to compare BUT, NIBUT, and OSPIT levels in groups of presbyopes and non-presbyopes, assessing the subjective as well as the objective response. 79 subjects were divided into two groups: non-presbyopes, 15 males, 24 females, mean age 23, and presbyopes, 21 males, 19 females, mean age 58. Only non-CL wearers were considered. At the same time, in order to assess the characteristics of the film, of the tear film, Polaris was used, and also accessory grids, which made it possible to consider the breakup field and other variables such as BUT or an NIBUT. An OSDI questionnaire was also considered to assess the symptoms and subjective response. Here you see a comparison of NIBUT and BUT between presbyopes and non-presbyopes. On average, NIBUT and BUT are reduced in presbyopes, but this reduction is not statistically significant. In the small link marble-like pattern, the NIBUT and the BUT values were lower in presbyopes. This reduction was statistically significant. One must also say that this reduction is not only significant from a statistical standpoint, it can be regarded as statistical also from the clinical standpoint. You may observe that if you look at NIBUT, for example, you go from 11 seconds to almost 4.5 seconds on average. But standard deviation is very high in this case. As for the wave pattern, the trend was similar. Presbyopes had average values for NIBUT and BUT, but reduction was only significant for NIBUT. The reliability of this comparison may be affected by the lack of homogeneity among the samples considered. Out of 79 subjects, only 10 had the wave pattern, and of these, 3 were presbyopes and 7 were not. So it was not the ideal condition for a head-to-head comparison. As for the amorphous pattern, there were no major differences in mean values between presbyopes and non-presbyopes. So this is true for NIBUT and BUT. Similar results were detected. The same was true for the interference fringe pattern. Here you can even see that NIBUT goes from a value of 9.4 up to 9.9 in presbyopes, so differences are really minor. However, there is great scattering of the data. We have compared the results of the OSDI questionnaire depending on the patterns. The score variation was significant only in 2 cases, the amorphous pattern and the marble-like large link pattern. Well, this one corresponds to more symptoms. And indeed, this pattern has mild or slight lipid coverage, which could favor the evaporation of the underlying aqueous component with destabilization of the tear film. Presbyopes having this pattern had much lower average NIBUT and BUT. As for the amorphous pattern, we did not expect any major or significant change. This pattern is a condition where the lipid layer is stable and uniform. There were no major differences in mean values between presbyopes and non-presbyopes either. Concerning this, we have performed a direct comparison of average values of presbyopes and non-presbyopes concerning NIBUT and BUT. Both for NIBUT and BUT, presbyopes had an average value of approximately
un valore più alto chiaramente nel NIBUT, più basso negli UT, però di fatto la riduzione era di circa 2 secondi.
2 seconds, higher for NIBUT and lower for BUT. Statistically, this was a significant variation, but not clinically. We're talking about 2 seconds only, and we're talking about two values which are well below the expected values. At the same time, we made this assessment for the OSDI questionnaire. We compared these scores between presbyopes and non-presbyopes, and we saw that there is quite high standard deviation and data scattering, reducing the reliability of the comparison. Going from 15 to 20 as a mean score, you see marginal dry eye conditions. In conclusion, we noticed that in presbyopes, the average NIBUT and BUT values were lower. This was true both as a function of the pattern and also in a direct comparison between presbyopes and non-presbyopes. We have decided to forget about the pattern of the lipid layer because between one blinking and the other there may be confounding variations. In the same pattern, we can also find the presence of two different patterns. Above, you may have a marble-like small link pattern, and below, large links. This may be confounding for the professionals, so we've decided to work independently of the lipid layer pattern. On average, this 2 seconds reduction was not regarded as significant. Well, we're talking about a trivial, a very small value, and we would have expected much higher average values. Probably, and I'm almost done, probably major phenomena played a role here, like the lightning system, which was a bit of a nuisance. Concerning subjective response, there was big data scattering, reducing the reliability. We ended up saying that not always does the questionnaire reflect a real situation. If one has characteristic dry eye, there may not be any signs on the ocular surface, while if there are signs on the eye, you may not necessarily have dry eye symptoms. Thank you.